Welcome to Napa Valley Inside Out. I'm Latife Hayson, and I am delighted to be hosting this podcast, shining a light on one of the most beautiful and coveted lifestyles in the world. If you're interested in developing a property, planting a vegetable garden, making olive oil, fashion, architecture, interior design, county rules and regulations, biking paths, art, getting into the wine business, farming practices, the tax benefits of owning a vineyard, or the ultimate private tours and tastings, and all the fabulous annual cultural events we enjoy here, and so much more, then you won't want to miss this show. Every week I will be interviewing amazing talent, vintners, entrepreneurs, leaders, consultants, event planners, and more. They will share their knowledge, experience, advice, goals, passions, and their best kept secrets. Hello everybody, and welcome to our first podcast of Napa Valley Inside Out. Today I am so excited to have TOR Kenwood of TOR Wines in Napa Valley. TOR has been in the valley for over 40 years and making wine for almost that amount of time. He has so many wonderful stories that we're going to share with you today. So TOR, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This is a great experience.
Of course. You know, when I first invited you onto the show, I thought you were the perfect person to share with us how it's possible to have a wine brand, a cult wine brand, for so long without ever owning a vineyard or a winery.
Well, it's an interesting place to start. Yeah, we've had, I've been making wine for now close to 35 years, but we've had the small winery, TOR Kenwood Family Wines, for 18 years now. And the business model in the last 20 years in particular really is, if you're going to build a winery, if you're going to start a winery, bring in partners. And since we started this brand, we've always been a partner, which has worked extremely well for all of us. We share equipment, we have everything that's cutting edge that we need. We're able to really focus on vineyards, which is very important, and I could talk about that forever. And the partnership really works from a business perspective.
Whereas it doesn't if you're on your own. I think you said to me once before we were talking that you use a winery once a year, right?
Well, you use the equipment, a lot of the equipment, once a year, and then you put it away for the next year.
Right.
You know, your optical sorters, your presses, a lot of very, very capital extensive equipment goes into hibernation for a good part of the year.
And then you have all the overhead of running the winery throughout the year, and typically a winery will have a tasting room, so you have that overhead.
There's so many pieces to the wine business, yes.
Yes, and so you've managed to escape all of that, which I think a lot of people come...
Some of it.
Yeah.
A good part of it, maybe.
A lot of people come to the valley and they tell me, I want to buy a vineyard, I want to buy a winery, and then when I finish quizzing them on what is your ultimate goal and how much do you want to make, and finally they realize that they don't need to own a winery, that you can do custom crush, and that you don't need to own a vineyard. Although I think I would change that advice now, because when I first started talking to people about this, you could actually find a vineyard, and a good vineyard. These days it is incredibly difficult, and one of the reasons you've been able to be very successful with your cult brand is because you have these incredible contracts with people that you've known forever on some of the best vineyards in the valley. So tell us about those relationships.
Well, that's the business to me, is being able to get into the right locations. I really look at Napa Valley much more like Burgundy or even Barolo than I do the traditional Bordeaux model, which most people would say, okay, Bordeaux, Cabernet blends. That's the prince, that's the king of Napa Valley. Why do you say it's more like Burgundy? To me, the real focus, almost from the beginning, but I think we're accelerating a little bit more, and even focusing more in recent history, and I've been a vintner now 40 plus years, is on the single vineyard, on the block within the single vineyard. It's almost like if you're, let's say, Roumier or one of the very, very top Burgundy producers. Maybe you have a place in Chambertin. Maybe you have inside Chambertin, you have Clos Saint-Jacques. And maybe you have that greatest block or one of the greatest blocks in that very small little area, which is Clos Saint-Jacques. That could be, that's Napa Valley to me. It's getting into the great, great parcels that have now proven themselves to make great Cabernet in Napa Valley. That's to me what the business is about.
And you have contracts with many of those great vineyards.
Well, you know what's interesting? When I started my own small winery, I had been with Beringer for quite some time, been 26 years. And people, when I had my going away party, and I was getting started the first couple of years, said, well, TOR, you know so many people because you've been in the business, and I was a very visible part of Beringer during those years. They said, all those contacts are going to help you enormously, and I didn't believe that. And you know, I look back now, 20 or 18 years into this wonderful project, TOR Kenward Family Wines, and I go, you know, it's about contacts. It's about people. It's really a people-driven business. So, yeah, the great vineyards are owned and farmed by people, sometimes second generation, third generation, some not, but they're people that want to have business partners that they trust, they can rely on, and they know are going to do a good job promoting that particular vineyard.
Right.
So somebody could come in out of nowhere and say, I'd like to pay 2 to 3 times as much for those grapes. And that person is not going to have entree to that vineyard because the owner is not so much interested in the 2 or 3 times or the big dollar. It's about having a business partner.
Right.
So for vineyards, for people in the trade, those relationships formed over 40 plus years have, in a wonderful way, reminded me time and time again, it's really a business about people.
Yes, and a lot of these vineyards that are owned by wineries, as we've seen in the last, I've certainly seen since I've been here in 18 years, a changing of the guard, you might say.
I think it keeps changing.
It keeps changing, but a lot of these wineries that have been around, family wineries for a very, very long time, they have got to the stage where they've passed on or they wanted their children to take over, and in the end the big family and corporate conglomerates have been buying up these properties and these great vineyards that come with them. So honestly, I think my advice to people when they ask me about, you don't need to own a winery, which I don't think you do, but a vineyard, you need to have a vineyard if you want to be in the wine business and have a consistent brand. But today they're few and far between. I mean, everybody's looking for a great vineyard and there's just no land left.
Yeah.
It's a very, very difficult, if you want to get into the business today, into the wine business, and you don't have access to great grapes, I mean, the chances of finding a fabulous vineyard are pretty slim, I would say.
I would agree.
Yeah. So I wanted to move on and talk a little more about you and your history. So I was doing some research on you, and I was on your website, which I think is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
One of the best websites I've seen in the wine industry for sure, and you have so much of your own personality there, and you tell the stories of the last 40 plus years that you've been in the Valley, which is taking us back to Julia Childs and Andre.
Mr. Chelachev, yes.
Yeah, so you've had some great friends, great mentors, and so on your homepage, I love this paragraph. A Southern Californian bohemian becomes a Vietnam vet, jazz club impresario, and dining companion of the beloved Julia Child. Sometimes stories take root and grow unexpected branches. Here are some of the stories that tell TOR. I loved the stories. They were so wonderful. Let's tell us a little bit about your life before you came to Napa Valley and how you and Susan ended up in Napa Valley.
Well, those are two different stories.
Okay.
But I guess there's some threads in there. As that intro to one of those stories began, I had gone through college, then Vietnam, and back to college. And during the process, I had a vow, especially when I came back, that my life was going to be really devoted toward things that excited me, that I felt I would be not only an avocation, but a vocation and something that I could immerse myself in. I had a jazz club, which was one of those early starts with a bunch of friends in Southern California. We put on Oscar Peterson, Stan Getz. We even did back when Steve Martin was a stand-up.
Oh my goodness.
Steve did a stand-up for us. We had Lily Tomlin, we had Bonnie Raitt. So we went outside jazz, Tom Waits.
Yeah.
And it was an exciting 2 years. During that same period of time, I fell in with a bunch of cork dorks, early cork dorks, who had access, because they were buying wines for some wine stores in Southern California, to the great, great wines of the world. And candidly, that's what really changed my life. They said, I like to cook, so you come and cook, we'll open the wines. And it was, as much as I love music, the wine industry began to really excite me a lot more. So they said, why don't you go up to Northern California? We have all these French wines, we have all these Italian wines, these famous wines, and champagne and so on. We have the great wines, but how about California wines? Why don't you go north, visit some of the wineries, and give us some wines that we can sell from California in the stores. I would come up to Napa and Sonoma and camp at both the Napa State Park.
Oh my goodness.
Throw a tent.
Not too far from there now.
Yeah, throw it. It's a little different now.
Not in a tent, but
no, I'm
close
not in
by.
a tent anymore. Life's been very good.
Yeah.
And sometimes get on bicycles or hop in the car and visit these people. And these people it was like the Wild West back then.
Really?
There were less than 40 wineries.
What year was this?
This was in the mid-'70s, 75,
Wow.
76.
Mm.
And, there were,
Really?
I should find out exactly, but I believe certainly under 50, maybe 40 or so wineries were really in operation. But you had these young entrepreneurs, which really became part of the Paris tasting, which were not so much the old established wineries, but these new people, the Warren Wynarskis, the Joe Heights, etc., that were creating some very exciting new wines, new names at that time. And these people were exciting people to know, to meet, and to spend a little bit of time with. And I think maybe the second or third year that I had this wonderful ability to come up and buy wines as a wine buyer, I said, I think I'm going to switch the table here, move my position at the table. And I said, I'm going to get into the wine business.
Wow.
And I just threw everything into the back of the car, ran beta breakers, got up the next morning, drove up to Napa Valley, applied for the 2 jobs that I heard of just through the rumor mill. I had a call the next day, and I took the job that was offered me and stayed with that company for 26, 27 years.
And that was Beringer.
That was Beringer.
Wow.
Right place, right time.
Yep.
Great company to
Yep.
work with.
Yeah.
Core management group, senior management group, of which I was a part of. They stayed together almost all those 26, 25 years.
No, that's incredible, yeah. And then you broke out and did your own thing in early 2000, around the dot-com days, 2001. And so what made you do that? I
had an opportunity to do that I did when I first came. I was senior management again. We sold the company, and because of that, I had a good amount of change in my back pocket, which I did not initially have. And I was able to start a winery by myself without anybody else as a partner, which is always my dream. So Susan and I said, let's do this, and we began TOR Family Wines.
So that was starting a wine brand rather than a winery, right?
If you go by definition, yes.
Yeah, okay. I'd love to talk to you, for you to share with us some of your stories about Julia.
Julia was, Julia and I spent a lot of time together. Back, I really got involved in wine and food. I thought it was critical for Beringer to have a very important, and if we could make it, cutting edge culinary program. And during the process of building those programs, Julia and I met each other quite a bit, and I'd invite her up to the winery and we'd spend time together, and we got along on a lot of different levels. You know, I think we talked politics as much as we talked wine and food.
Oh, fantastic.
Which was fun for me, and she was such a a delightful person.
Yeah.
She lit up a room wherever she went. So she started an organization with Bob Mondavi and Dick Graff called the American Institute of Wine and Food, and she asked me to be on the founding board. So I said yes. I never said no to Julia. And over the years, she asked me to join a couple other boards related to wine and food. And we ended up spending a lot of time together her last couple years when she would come up and she needed an escort to drive her around. So we would spend good time together. She'd wear me out.
Yeah,
Oh, she would. It was always a late night because there'd be at least 1 to 2 places we'd go to, and to visit friends or a restaurant or restaurants, and people wanted to be with Julia.
Yeah, she had that personality.
And I'd be sort of nodding off a little bit, and she'd be going strong.
Fantastic. So many great legends, forefathers and mothers of the valley that have left this incredible valley for us and this lifestyle to enjoy have passed on. What about Andre? Did you work under him? Was he a friend?
Well, he's a friend. The thing with Andre, and anybody of my generation would certainly back this up, his door was always open. So he was working for Beaulieu, of course, and with the family to begin with, and then with Hugh Blind toward the end. And all during the period of time, Andre gave everybody who would listen or wanted to walk into his office free advice.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So if you were a young person and you were absolutely interested in learning everything you could about wine, you had to visit Andre. You had to meet Andre. You had to hang with Andre as much as you could, because he was a genius in a lot of ways.
Right. And Bob Mondavi was like that, wasn't he? I hear stories that he was always very generous.
Very, very generous with his time. Another thing about Bob, I worked with Bob on several of his boards over the years, and spent some good time with Bob over the years that he was developing his winery. Bob believed strongly, even as his winery grew to be a much larger winery, but he believed in the importance of having a lot of smaller wineries working hard on the reputation of Napa Valley wines. So if somebody needed help or needed equipment or needed anything, you could count on going to Bob, and he would get to you, and you would probably get exactly what you needed if you needed it quickly.
That's fantastic.
So he was very accessible to all of us, and he was a big supporter of not just Bob Mondavi, but of the Napa Valley.
Napa Valley, yeah.
In fact, toward the end, he stood up almost on every occasion he possibly could in public and made that very clear.
Yeah, I think every time I've read anything about him, I hear the same thing. So how do you see the future of Napa Valley? We've had so much growth, I mean, so many changes since I've been here.
Yeah.
How do you see the future? What does it look like to you, say, over 10 or 20 years? Will it still be the idyllic lifestyle that we enjoy today?
It's changed so much in my 40 years. It is a place that's now fighting different battles. So you could say that the original battle that the Ag Preserve looked at, what was that, 70s?
It's coming up for its 20th. Is it its 20th or 25th wedding anniversary now? This year? Yeah, they're celebrating. I think it's their 20th anniversary.
And that was critical to me, anyway. I think it was very important to. I think without it, Napa Valley would not be what we think it is right now. It would not be anywhere near as successful as a wine growing region as it is right now. So I think the next 20 years are going to be finding a balance between, okay, we're a wine producing appellation. Wine is the most important thing that we do here. How do we balance that? Tourism, growth, opportunities, traffic. How do we find the balance? So we're at a point right now where we need to look very hard at those issues. And some people are not going to be happy about some of the decisions made, because it may appear to some that the drawbridge is coming up and not everybody can do what they've been doing the last 40 years. But I think it's very important that we work together to find that balance and those solutions. That's, to me, the critical battle of the next 20 years.
I think we've been experiencing that battle, though, haven't we, for a
absolutely.
number of years. Well, how do you think that we have managed it to date in, say, the last 10 years?
I would give us a C+.
Yeah, that's not good.
I think we can do better.
Yeah. How do you think we could do better?
I think we need to work together. There's a lot of interests involved. Obviously, business interests, commercial interests. Wine is I think we always need to keep the eye on what's brought us here, which is the quality and the reputation of our wines. And never take our eye off that, or don't go down some side roads that maybe get us into some detours along the way. You have a lot of special interests, you have a lot of interests, and I think they all need to get at the table and find a language to talk to. And I would like to see all the cities that make up Napa Valley, whether it's Calistoga to Napa, to actually have a common table. Yeah. Okay, what are you doing? And so that we're looking, I think the most viable areas that thrive with tourism, and they're relatively small, are areas where people have actually been able to sit down at the table and come up with 10, 20, 30-year, 50-year plans on what growth is and how to manage that growth. And we've struggled with that, I think.
I think St. Helena is just struggling itself with just St. Helena sitting at the table and to get all the cities together. St. Helena has really had a rough time with trying to figure out. I think they're the only city within the Napa Valley that doesn't want growth, and the other cities have realized that to survive financially, that they have had to succumb to growth and more and more hotels, which of course brings traffic.
Right, but you need to find the balance so that you do have rooms. If you have restaurants, it's finding a balance there. I would have liked to, and I don't like to see, rapid growth, but I think that St. Helena probably could have used a few more hotel rooms over the last 10 or 20 years to support its restaurant business and the wineries in the area there. It's finding, I think, a good balance, and I personally think that St. Helena's got some good leaders in place right now. So I'm very optimistic about St. Helena taking a really smart, long-term picture. But I like to be optimistic.
Yes, no, of course. But you know, I think one of the biggest challenges is the traffic and how having two roads, Highway 29, Silverado Trail, and you don't have roundabouts. In Sydney, Australia, we have roundabouts everywhere. They're so efficient. Then they have these stoplights, four-way stops. They're just not efficient. They cause a lot of traffic. And they're not going to have underground. We have underground. They don't have overpaths. I mean, I just don't even know how we're going to cope with the traffic. I mean, I'm all about all the wonderful things that are happening in Napa Valley, but I can't quite figure out how they're going to pull it off unless they do something about the roads.
Well, I remember years ago at Behringer we did a study, and the Valley actually got together to make the study a Valley study. It wasn't just a Behringer, but we participated in it. And it looked at traffic and what worked in tasting rooms, what worked going up and down the valley. And in a nutshell, my recollection was that there's a point of diminishing returns.
Right.
So if the person coming up the valley has so much traffic, they don't have a quality experience. They spend a lot of that going, oh, this is just horrible.
Yeah.
Or they go into a tasting room that's just so crowded that they can't have a quality experience in there. They're not going to come back time and time again. And I think that reputation will probably go outwards. So, there is a point in my mind anyway of diminishing returns. So if you don't manage that somehow, you're going to hurt yourself in the end. It's sort of the golden egg and the goose. You got to be careful.
Yeah, it really is a tricky one. I wanted to circle back to your family. Your mother was a pretty famous actress.
We found that out later in life, yeah, but on Broadway and not in film or anything like that.
And so fascinating, she never told you. She was a very quiet and unassuming woman who didn't look for the limelight. I see you the same way. I think she rubbed off on you. Very talented, extremely talented.
Well, that's a great compliment, because she's an adorable person.
Yeah. What was one of the lessons that Julia Childs taught you?
Julia taught me that certainly with food, as a chef and as a winemaker, you never ever know everything there is about wine or food, or as being a chef. And occasionally though I run into people in the wine business in particular that seem to think they know everything about wine.
Oh.
And when you start to spend a little time with them and you ask them how long they've been studying, most of them are great students of wine. They'll tell you that they've been in wine business for about 5-6 years. Those are the ones that know everything there is about wine. And it's funny, if you run into the same person, maybe 10, 15, maybe even 20 years later, it's amazing how much less they know about wine at that period of time.
Oh, that is so funny. Yeah, the learning curve never ends, does it?
It goes on forever. In fact, the longer you spend in this business, and I'm sure a chef would say the same thing, is you realize how much you really don't know and possibly never will.
Right, yeah. And so you love to cook, right?
I still do, yes.
Yeah, so did you go to school?
Never went to culinary school, but I ran a culinary school thanks to Julia, who would come out and help, and Madeline Kamen and other great chefs. I ran a culinary school at Behringer we did it for about 12 years.
And are they still running that?
No. The programs, once Madeline left, we closed the program down, but we had a lot of fun when we had the school.
And who was Madeline?
Madeline Kamen was somebody I met maybe 40 years ago, and I think Julia was the great communicator. Madeline was the great teacher, still unappreciated and known by a lot of people. She introduced me to a chef by the name of Gary Danko. Who
Oh, love Gary Danko.
Gary was our chef at Beringer for 6-7 years.
Is that right? Oh.
And Julia introduced me to Gary and many other people, but she was an extraordinary talent, underappreciated, not well known unless you're a big foodie, which you know Madeline. And she really ran the school. I just turned it over to her.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, she was an amazing woman.
And do you entertain a lot of your clients?
Mostly not anymore. Susan and I do a little cooking now and then, but we don't do as much as we used to.
Oh boy,
candidly.
yeah. Well, listen, it's been so wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much. I know our viewers
It went fast.
Yeah, I know, it always does, but we'll have you back because there's so much to talk about.
Thank you.
And so many more stories over the last 40 years.
Too many.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you
so much. Thank you for joining us. You can find more episodes of the show on my website, latifehayson.com, or on my social media pages on LinkedIn, Instagram, and my Facebook page, Latife Hayson Wine Country Properties. We have a stellar lineup of movers and shakers in the Valley coming on the show, so I look forward to being with you next week and introducing you to another one of my fabulous guests.